The wind howled through the dusty streets of Red Hollow. It carried secrets no one dared speak aloud. It was the kind of town where men didn't ask questions, because answers usually came with a bullet. And standing at the edge of that town, boots planted in dry earth, was Colt Walker, a man carved from grit and silence, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes as sharp as a hawk circling prey, a cowboy who had seen too much, lost too much, and trusted no one, not anymore. His horse, a coal-black stallion named Midnight, snorted beneath him as the stagecoach rolled in, kicking up clouds of dust. Colt narrowed his eyes. "Mail order brides," muttered the old stable hand beside him, spitting into the dirt. "Another one coming to marry some poor fool." Colt didn't respond, but he watched. He always watched. The stagecoach creaked to a stop outside the saloon, the rusted spur. The door swung open, and the driver jumped down, stretching his back. Then, she stepped out, and the whole world seemed to pause. She wasn't like the others. An bright smile. No hopeful eyes scanning for her future husband. Instead, she moved carefully, like every step hurt, like she was trying not to break. Her dress was simple, dust-stained from travel. Her hands clutched a small leather bag, too small for someone starting a new life. And her eyes. God. Her eyes held something Colt recognized instantly. Pain, not the kind you talk about, the kind you bury, the kind that follows you. Colt's jaw tightened. Something ain't right, he muttered under his breath. The woman glanced around the town, her gaze cautious, almost afraid. Then her eyes met his. Just for a second, but it was enough. Colt felt it like a gunshot to the chest, because behind her guarded expression, behind the strength she was trying so hard to hold together, she was hiding something, something big, something dangerous. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with whiskey, sweat, and low murmurs. Men turned as she entered. Some smirked, some stared, some whispered. A stranger in Red Hollow was always noticed, but a woman like her, she was trouble waiting to happen. At the bar stood Hank Dawson, a rancher pushing 50, belly heavy, eyes greedy. He grinned as she approached. "Well now," Hank said, tipping his hat. "You must be Miss Evelyn Carter," she said softly. Her voice was steady, too steady, like she had practiced it. Hank's grin widened. "Your future husband," Evelyn forced a smile. But Colt, watching from the corner, saw the truth. That smile never reached her eyes, not even close. Later that evening, the sun bled red across the horizon as Colt rode back toward his ranch. But something nagged at him, something he couldn't shake. He had seen fear before, plenty of it, but what he saw in that woman was different. It wasn't fear of the unknown. It was fear of something chasing her. And that meant one thing. Trouble wasn't coming. It was already here. The next morning, Colt returned to town. He told himself it was for supplies, but deep down, he knew better. He found her behind the general store, struggling to lift a crate. Without a word, he stepped forward and took it from her hands. She flinched. Actually flinched. Colt froze. That wasn't normal. For someone meeting a stranger offering help. That was instinct. The kind built from experience. Bad experience. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said quietly. Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes guarded. "I didn't say you would." Her voice was calm again, controlled. But Colt saw the truth anyway. "Where you from?" he asked. She hesitated. "Too long. Back east." "That's a mighty big place." Her grip tightened on her bag. "You ask a lot of questions for a stranger." Colt smirked slightly. "And you avoid answers like someone with something to hide." For a moment silence. Tension crackled between them. Then Evelyn stepped back. "I should go." She turned. Quickly. Too quickly, and as she walked away, Colt noticed something else. A slight limp, barely visible. But there. His eyes darkened. Whoever she was, whatever she was running from, it had already hurt her. That night, Colt couldn't sleep. The wind howled louder than usual. Or maybe it just felt that way. He stepped outside, scanning the horizon, and that's when he saw it. A flicker of movement, far off. Riders, 3 of them. watching the town from a distance. Colt's instinct screamed. This wasn't coincidence. This was hunting, and he knew exactly who the prey was. Back in town, inside Hank Dawson's house, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling for the first time all day. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded photograph. A man stared back at her from the paper. Cold eyes, cruel smile. She whispered under her breath, "You'll never find me." But even as she said it, a tear slipped down her cheek. Because deep down, she knew the truth. He already had. Outside, in the darkness beyond Red Hollow, one of the riders smirked. "She's here," he said. The man beside him nodded. "Boss is gonna want her alive." The third man cocked his rifle. "Alive. If she's lucky." They turned their horses toward the town, slow, patient, like wolves circling prey, and standing at the edge of Red Hollow. Colt Walker reached for his gun, because something told him this wasn't just a stranger's problem anymore. This was war. As the riders began their silent approach toward Red Hollow, Colt's eyes locked onto them in the darkness, and for the first time in years, he felt something dangerous rise in his chest. Not fear, not hesitation, something far more deadly. Protection. Because whether she liked it or not, Evelyn Carter was no longer alone. The sun rose slow over Red Hollow, spilling gold across the dry land like nothing bad had ever touched it. But Colt Walker knew better. Trouble didn't disappear with daylight. It just hid better. Colt stood outside the sheriff's office, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the horizon, where he'd seen the riders the night before. They were gone now, but that didn't mean they had left. It meant they were waiting, and men who waited were always the most dangerous kind. Sheriff Boone stepped out beside him, adjusting his badge. "You look like a man expectin' trouble," Boone said. Colt didn't glance at him. "Already saw it." Boone frowned. "What kind?" "3 riders, armed, watchin' the town." Boone's jaw tightened. "You sure?" Colt finally turned, his stare sharp. "I don't mistake hunters for travelers." A long silence followed, then Boone sighed. "You think they're here for someone?" Colt didn't answer right away, but one face flashed through his mind. Evelyn Carter. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." Evelyn was in the small kitchen of Hank Dawson's house, her sleeves rolled up as she scrubbed dishes that were already clean. It wasn't about the work. It was about staying busy, because when she stopped, the memories came back. The shouting, the footsteps, the sound of a door slamming open. Her hand trembled. She quickly set the dish down, gripping the edge of the table. "Not here," she whispered. "Not now. You plannin' to wash that plate clean off the map?" Hank's voice made her jump. She turned quickly, forcing a small smile. "I was just finishing up." Hank stepped closer, his eyes roaming over her in a way that made her stomach twist. "You don't gotta work so hard," he said. "You're here to be my wife." Evelyn nodded, but inside something recoiled. "Of course," she said softly. Hank reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She froze, just for a second, but it was enough. Hank's smile faded slightly. "You're a nervous thing, ain't ya?" "I'm just tired from the journey." He studied her for a moment, then chuckled. "Well, you'll get used to things here." Evelyn swallowed hard. That was exactly what she was afraid of. Later that afternoon, Evelyn slipped out of the house, needing air, needing space, needing something she couldn't name. She walked toward the edge of town, where the land opened wide and the noise faded into silence. And that's where she saw him, Colt, leaning against the fence, watching the horizon like a man who trusted nothing. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Evelyn stopped a few feet away. "I could say the same about you." A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "Difference is I know how to handle trouble, and you assume I don't?" Now he looked at her, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. "I assume," Colt said slowly, "that you've already had more trouble than most." Evelyn's breath caught. She turned away quickly. "You don't know anything about me." "No," he admitted, "but I know fear when I see it. I'm not afraid." "Then why do you flinch every time someone gets too close?" Silence, heavy, unavoidable. Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. "You should mind your own business, Mr. Walker." Colt pushed off the fence, stepping closer but not too close. "Not enough to scare her. Business," he said quietly, "is keepin' this town safe." Her eyes flickered. "From what?" Colt held her gaze. "From whatever you brought with you." That hit harder than she expected. Evelyn took a step back. "I didn't bring anything. Those riders last night say otherwise." Her face went pale, just for a second, but Colt saw it, and that was all the confirmation he needed. "You saw them?" she whispered. "Yeah." Her composure cracked. "Not completely, but enough." "They can't be here," she said, almost to herself. "They are." Evelyn shook her head, panic creeping in. "No, I came too far. I made sure." "Made sure of what?" She stopped, closed off again, like a door slammed shut. "You should go," she said quickly. Colt's expression hardened. "Running ain't gonna help you." "Not running. You already did." That stung. Evelyn's eyes flashed. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand." For a moment, it looked like she might finally let someone in. Her lips parted, her eyes softened, and then a voice cut through the moment. "There you are." Hank Dawson approached, his expression tight. Evelyn stepped back immediately, putting distance between herself and Colt. Hank's gaze shifted between them, suspicious, possessive. "You wanderin' off without tellin' me now?" Hank asked. "I just needed some air." Hank forced a smile, but his eyes stayed cold. "Well, next time, you let me know." Evelyn nodded. Colt watched the exchange carefully, every detail, every look, and one thing became clear. Evelyn wasn't just hiding from someone, she was trapped here too. That evening, the saloon buzzed louder than usual. Colt sat at a corner table, eyes scanning every face, waiting, watching, and then the door swung open. 3 men walked in, dust-covered, armed, and smiling like they already owned the place. Colt's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. "It was them. No doubt about it. The riders from the night before." The tallest one stepped forward, glancing around the room. "Nice little town," he said. "Be a shame if something happened to it." The room went quiet, dead quiet. Sheriff Boone stood up slowly. "You boys lookin' for trouble?" The man smirked. "Just lookin' for someone." Colt's jaw clenched. He already knew the answer, but hearing it still hit like a hammer. "Woman," the man continued, "goes by the name Evelyn Carter." Across the room a glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered, and in that instant Colt knew everything was about to change. The outlaw's eyes scanned the room, and slowly a cruel smile spread across his face. "Found her." Colt turned sharply just as the man reached for his gun, and across town, Evelyn stepped out of Hank's house completely unaware that death had just ridden into Red Hollow. For her, the moment the outlaw said her name, everything in the saloon froze. Even the air felt heavier. Colt Walker didn't move right away, but his mind did. Fast, sharp, deadly. 3 men, armed, confident, not desperate. That meant one thing. They weren't chasing her for money, they were chasing her for something personal, something worth killing for. Sheriff Boone stepped forward, resting his hand on his holster. "Ain't no one by that name here," he said calmly. The tall outlaw smiled, slow, mocking. "You might want to think real hard before you lie to me, Sheriff." The room stayed silent. No one breathed. No one moved. Because everyone felt it. Violence was seconds away. Colt finally stood, chair scraping against the wooden floor like a warning. "You boys picked the wrong town," he said. The outlaw turned his gaze toward him, measured him. "Yeah," he said. "And who the hell are you?" "Someone who don't take kindly to threats." A pause, then the outlaw chuckled. "I like him," he said to his men. "Got some spine." His eyes narrowed. "But spine breaks real easy." Colt didn't flinch, didn't blink. "Try it." The tension snapped, tight as a pulled trigger. For a moment it looked like blood would spill right then and there. But then the outlaw raised a hand slightly. "Not yet." "We ain't here for a fight," he said, though his tone said otherwise. "We're here for the girl." Colt tilted his head slightly. "And if she don't want to be found?" The outlaw's smile disappeared. "That ain't her choice." That confirmed it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was ownership, and Colt hated that more than anything. Across town, Evelyn walked slowly along the side of Hank's house. Her breath uneven. Something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it, like a storm rolling in without warning. Her hand instinctively went to her side where, hidden beneath her dress, was a faint scar. Old, but not forgotten. Back in the saloon, Colt stepped closer to the outlaw. "Let me give you some advice," he said quietly. "Turn around, ride out. Forget you ever heard that name." The outlaw stared at him, then laughed. Loud. "Colt, you got no idea who you're talking to, do you?" Colt's voice dropped lower. "I don't need to." That was enough. The outlaw's hand twitched toward his gun, and in a flash Colt moved. Faster than most men could think. His gun was drawn, aimed straight at the outlaw's chest. The room erupted into chaos. Chairs scraped. Men ducked. Glass shattered. The other two outlaws reached for their weapons, but Sheriff Boone had his gun up too. "Don't!" Boone barked. For a moment everything balanced on a knife's edge. 3 outlaws, 2 guns ready. One wrong move and Red Hollow would drown in blood. Then, the outlaw slowly raised his hands, smiling. Again. But this time there was something darker behind it. "All right," he said. "No need to rush things." Colt didn't lower his weapon. "Start walkin'." The outlaw nodded slightly to his men. "Let's go." They backed toward the door. Slow, careful. But, as they stepped outside, the tall outlaw locked eyes with Colt one last time, and said something that made the blood run. "Colt, you can't protect her forever." Then, they were gone. The saloon exhaled. All at once, noise returned, but it wasn't the same. Nothing was. Colt holstered his gun. Slowly, Sheriff Boone stepped beside him. "You just made enemies," Boone said. Colt's eyes stayed on the door. "They already were." Boone hesitated. "You gonna tell me what this is about?" Colt shook his head slightly. "Not yet." But inside he knew. He wasn't just involved anymore. He was in the middle of something far bigger than a runaway bride. That night, Colt rode hard toward Hank Dawson's ranch. The wind cut against his face. But he didn't slow down, because now, time mattered. Evelyn was sitting alone when she heard it. Hoofbeats, fast, approaching. Her heart jumped into her throat. For a split second, she thought it was them. "They found me." She stood quickly, panic rising, then the door burst open. "Colt." She froze, relief and fear colliding all at once. "You need to come with me," he said. "No, they're here." That stopped her cold. Her face drained of color. "How many?" "3. Her breath shook. "That's not all of them." Colt frowned. "What do you mean?" Evelyn stepped back, shaking her head. "I didn't want this. I didn't want anyone else getting dragged into it." Colt stepped closer. "Too late for that." Silence filled the room, heavy. Then, finally, Evelyn broke, not with tears, but with truth. "They work for a man named Victor Hale," she said. The name meant nothing to Colt. But, the way she said it, it meant everything. "He's not just an outlaw," she continued. "He owns men, towns, lawmen. He doesn't chase people." Her voice cracked slightly. "Unless they belong to him." Colt's jaw tightened. "And you?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him, and for the first time she didn't hide. "I ran from him," she said. "I was supposed to marry him." The words hit like thunder. Colt went still. "And you think he's just gonna let that go?" Evelyn let out a hollow breath. "I know he won't." She reached into her bag again, hands trembling, and pulled out that same photograph. She handed it to Colt. "This is him." Colt looked down. Cold eyes, cruel smile. A man who didn't just take, he owned. He destroyed. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. "If they're here," her eyes filled with fear, "then he's not far behind." Outside in the darkness beyond the ranch, a fourth rider sat silently on his horse, watching. Unlike The others he didn't move, didn't rush, because men like him didn't chase. They arrived. Colt slowly lowered the photograph, his expression hardening, because for the first time he understood the truth. This wasn't just about protecting a woman. This was about standing against a man who controlled everything he touched, and just as that realization settled in, a single gunshot echoed through the night. Close, too close, Evelyn gasped, and Colt turned toward the sound, knowing one thing for certain. Victor Hale had just arrived in Red Hollow. The gunshot still echoed through the night when Colt grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. The air had changed. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was war. Stay inside, Colt ordered. Evelyn followed him anyway. I'm not hiding anymore, she said, her voice shaking but determined. Colt glanced back at her. For a moment, he almost argued, but then he saw the shift in her. She wasn't just running anymore, she was done being afraid. Stay close, he said instead. They moved toward the sound of the shot, boots crunching against dry dirt, the wind carrying whispers of danger across the land. As they approached the main road, they saw him. A man lay in the dirt, Sheriff Boone, bleeding, barely conscious. Evelyn gasped. Oh my God! Colt dropped to his knees beside him. Boone, who did this? The sheriff coughed, blood staining his lips. Too late, he rasped. Colt's grip tightened. Who? Boone's eyes shifted weakly past him, toward the road. Colt turned, and that's when he saw him, a lone rider, still, silent, watching, even from a distance. There was something wrong about him. Not wild like the others, not loud, but controlled, cold. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice because everyone else already feared it. Evelyn's breath caught behind Colt. No, she whispered. Colt didn't need to ask, he already knew. Victor Hale. Victor dismounted slowly, every movement calm, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. Because to him he did. Well now, Victor's voice carried across the distance, smooth and chilling. That's a disappointing reunion. Evelyn's hand gripped the back of Colt's shirt. Colt stepped forward, putting himself between them. You picked the wrong town, Colt said. Victor's lips curved slightly. No, he replied. I picked the right one. His eyes shifted to Evelyn, and in that moment she looked like she couldn't breathe. Come here, Victor said. Not a request, a command. Evelyn didn't move. Colt's hand dropped to his gun. She ain't going anywhere. Victor tilted his head slightly, studying him. Ah, he said. You must be the cowboy. Colt didn't respond. Victor smiled faintly. I was told you might be a problem, and I was hoping you'd show up, Colt replied. For a moment, the world went silent again. Two men, opposite sides of the same line. Only one would walk away from it. Victor sighed softly. You've made this unnecessarily complicated, he said. Then his gaze hardened. But I'll make you a deal. Colt didn't trust it, didn't believe it, but he listened. Victor gestured toward Evelyn. You give her to me. A pause. And I let this town live. The words hit like a hammer. Evelyn's grip on Colt tightened. No, she whispered. Colt didn't even hesitate. No. Deal. Victor's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Something darker. I was hoping you'd say that, he said quietly. The tension snapped. Gunfire exploded into the night. Colt grabbed Evelyn, pulling her down as bullets tore through the air. Victor's men appeared from the shadows. More than before. 5, maybe 6. They'd been hiding, waiting. This was never a simple retrieval. It was an execution run. Colt shouted. Evelyn didn't argue this time. They moved fast, darting between buildings as bullets slammed into wood and dirt around them. The town erupted into chaos. People screaming, doors slamming. Let's going out. Colt pulled Evelyn into the alley behind the saloon. We can't stay here, he said. They'll burn the whole place to the ground. Evelyn shook her head, panic rising again. There's nowhere to go. He'll find me anywhere. Colt grabbed her shoulders. Look at me, she did, barely holding it together. You ain't alone anymore, he said. firmly, something in his voice. It steadied her, just enough. They slipped out of town under the cover of darkness, heading toward Colt's ranch. Behind them, Red Hollow burned. Hours later, they reached the ranch, exhausted, shaken, alive. For now, inside, the silence felt unreal after the chaos. Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. "They're going to kill everyone because of me," she said softly. Colt leaned against the wall. "They chose this. Not you. I brought him here. You ran from him. And now, he's destroying everything I touched." Her voice broke. Finally, Colt pushed off the wall and stepped closer. "That ain't on you." She shook her head. "You don't understand what he is. Then tell me." Silence. "Then, he doesn't lose," she whispered. "Ever." Colt's eyes hardened. "Then it's about time he does." Evelyn looked up at him, and for the first time, there was something else in her eyes. Not fear, just pain. Something deeper, something dangerous. Hope. But hope in a place like this was fragile, because outside in the distance flames still rose from Red Hollow, and Victor Hale stood at the edge of the burning town, watching the fire reflect in his cold eyes. One of his men approached. "What now, boss?" Victor didn't look away from the flames. "Now," he said calmly, "we take everything from her." Back at the ranch, Evelyn stood slowly, walked toward Colt, close enough to feel his breath. "You should leave," she said. Colt frowned. "Not happening. You stay with me," she continued, her voice trembling. "You'll lose everything." Colt looked at her for a long moment, then said something that changed everything. "Too late." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Why?" she asked softly. Colt hesitated. Just for a second. Then, "Because I see you," he said. Her breath caught. "And I ain't walking away from that." For a moment, nothing else existed. No danger. No past. Just the space between them. Closing, slowly, inevitably. And then a gun clicked behind Colt's head. Both of them froze. A familiar voice spoke from the shadows. Low, shaking, betrayed. "You should've." Colt's eyes darkened, because he knew that voice. Hank Dawson. Hank stepped forward, gun aimed straight at Colt, his face twisted with anger and jealousy. "You think I didn't see what's going on?" he snarled. Evelyn's voice broke. "Hank, please shut up," he roared. The gun pressed harder against Colt's head. "You brought this hell into my life." Hank spat. "Now, aching it back." Colt didn't move, didn't flinch, but his eyes locked with Evelyn's. And in that moment, they both knew the real danger wasn't outside anymore. It was standing right behind them. The sound of the gun clicking behind Colt's head was louder than any gunshot. Because this one was personal. Hank Dawson's hand trembled, but his grip on the revolver stayed tight. "You think I'm a fool?" he snarled. "Think I didn't see the way she looks at you?" Colt stood still, injured. "Wait, Evelyn stepped forward, her voice breaking. "Hank, please. This isn't what you think, isn't it?" Hank roared. "I bring you into my home, give you everything, and this is how you repay me." His voice cracked, not with sadness, with rage, with humiliation, and that made him even more dangerous. Colt spoke calmly. "You don't want to do this. Shut up." Hank snapped, pressing the gun harder. "You've already taken enough from me." "I ain't taken anything," Colt replied. "She ain't yours to lose." That hit hard. Hank's face twisted. "She's my wife." Evelyn shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No, I was never yours." Silence fell like a hammer. Hank's expression went still, cold, deadly. "Then what are you?" he whispered. Evelyn swallowed. "A woman trying to survive." That was the moment everything broke. Hank's finger tightened on the trigger and Colt moved. Fast, violent, precise. He twisted, grabbing Hank's wrist just as the gun fired. Bang. The bullet tore into the ceiling. Evelyn screamed. Colt slammed his elbow into Hank's chest, sending him crashing back against the wall. The gun fell skidding across the floor. Both men lunged for it. Hank was closer, but Colt was faster. He kicked the gun away, then drove his fist into Hank's jaw. Once, twice. Hank staggered, Dazed but desperation made him dangerous. He tackled Colt, both men crashing through a wooden table. Splinters exploded, dust filled the air. They rolled, fists flying, each hit heavier than the last. Evelyn stood frozen, terrified. Because this wasn't just a fight, this was survival. Hank grabbed a broken table leg, swinging it wildly. Colt barely dodged as it smashed into the wall. "You ruined everything," Hank roared. Colt surged forward, slamming Hank into the ground, pinning him. "Listen to me," Colt growled. "This ain't about me." But Hank wasn't listening. He reached for a knife strapped to his boot, pulled it free, and drove it upward straight toward Colt's chest. "Colt!" Evelyn's scream cut through the chaos. Colt twisted at the last second, the blade slicing across his side instead of his heart. Pain ripped through him, hot, sharp, but not enough to stop him. He grabbed Hank's wrist, slamming it against the floor. Once, twice, until the knife clattered away. Then silence, heavy breathing, blood on the floor. Colt slowly stood. Hank lay beneath him, broken, beaten, defeated. Evelyn rushed forward. "Colt, your side." "I'm fine," he said, though he wasn't. Blood soaked through his shirt, but he didn't look at the wound. He looked at Hank. Hank coughed, barely conscious. "You think this is over?" he rasped. Colt's eyes hardened. "No," he said. "But you are." Hank laughed weakly. "You don't get it. None of you do." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Hank's bloodied face twisted into something ugly. "Victor," he said. "He ain't just comin' for her." A pause. "He paid me." The words hit like a gunshot. Evelyn stepped back in shock. "No." Colt's jaw clenched. "Say that again." Hank coughed, smiling through blood. "I wrote for a bride, but not for a wife." His eyes flicked to Evelyn. For bait. Everything stopped. Everything. Evelyn's world shattered in an instant. "You sold me," she whispered. Hank laughed weakly. "I was in debt. Victor offered me a way out." Her voice broke. "So you brought me here, knowing he'd come?" Hank's silence was answer enough. Colt's hands curled into fists. Rage like he hadn't felt in years surged through him. Not just anger, fury, the kind that burns everything aside. Hoofbeats, many, fast, closing in. Colt's head snapped toward the door. "They're here." Gunfire erupted before the words even settled. Bullets tore through the walls. Windows shattered. Victor's men had surrounded the ranch. "Get down," Colt shouted, grabbing Evelyn and pulling her behind cover. Wood splintered as bullets ripped through the house. Dust filled the air. The ranch was under siege. Colt grabbed his rifle, checking the chamber. "Stay behind me," he said. Evelyn shook her head. "No." He looked at her. "I'm not hiding anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "If this ends, it ends with me standing." Colt stared at her for a second, then nodded. "All right." He handed her a spare revolver. Then, "Don't miss." They moved together side by side. Not running, not hiding. Fighting. Colt kicked open the door, firing. Instantly, two of Victor's men dropped. Evelyn fired next her, hands shaking but her aim true. Another man fell. The night exploded into chaos. Gunfire, shouting, smoke, fire. The ranch lit up like a battlefield, and then through the flames he appeared. Victor, hale, untouched, unhurried, walking straight toward them like nothing could stop him. Colt lowered his rifle slightly. This was it, the end of the road. Victor stopped a few feet away, his eyes locked on Evelyn. "You've caused quite a mess," he said calmly. Evelyn stepped forward, gun raised, but her hands trembled. "It ends tonight," she said. Victor smiled faintly. "Oh, it already has." He raised his hand slightly, and suddenly Colt felt it. Cold steel pressed against the back of his head. "Another man, hidden. Wait." Victor's voice dropped. "Drop the gun." Evelyn froze. Colt didn't move. "Don't," he said quietly. Victor tilted his head. "Careful," he murmured. "You don't want to watch him die." Evelyn's breath broke. Her gun trembled harder. Time slowed. Everything balanced on one impossible choice. Victor's voice cut through the flames. Choose. Evelyn, her heart pounded, her hands shook. Her world collapsed into a single moment. Drop the gun, and he lives. A tear slid down her cheek. Colt's eyes locked onto hers. Steady, unafraid. And then she made her choice. Her fingers loosened. The gun slipped from her hand and hit the ground. Victor smiled. But Colt didn't. Because he saw something Victor didn't. Something dangerous. Something final. Evelyn Carter wasn't surrendering. She was about to end everything. The revolver hit the dirt with a dull thud. And in that single sound, everything changed. Victor Hale smiled. Slow. Victorious. There it is, he said softly. I knew you'd remember your place. Evelyn stood still. Her hands empty. Her face unreadable. But inside something had shifted. Not fear anymore. Something stronger. Colt didn't move. Didn't fight the gun pressed against his head. Because he saw it in her eyes. That quiet fire. The same one he'd been waiting for since the moment she stepped off that stagecoach. She wasn't giving up. She was choosing. Victor stepped closer, boots crunching against gravel. You always were stubborn, he said, circling her slowly. But I admire that. Evelyn didn't respond, didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed on Colt. Just for a second, and in that glance, everything was said. Trust me. Victor stopped in front of her, reaching out, grabbing her chin, forcing her to look at him. You should have stayed where you belonged, he said. Coldly, Evelyn's voice came out low, steady. I was never yours. Victor's grip tightened. His smile vanished. You were promised to me. I was sold to you. That hit deeper than any bullet. Victor's eyes darkened. You think that changes anything? Evelyn didn't hesitate. It changes everything. And then it happened. Fast. Final, unstoppable. Evelyn moved. Not backward. Forward. Straight. Into him. Her hand flashed and suddenly a small hidden pistol appeared from beneath her sleeve. A last weapon. A secret she had kept even from Colt. Bang. The shot tore through the night. Victor staggered. Shock flashing across his face. He looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then back at her, disbelief. For the first time in his life he hadn't been in control. The same instant Colt moved. He drove his elbow back into the man holding him, spun, fired. The last of Victor's men dropped. Silence crashed down over the ranch. Victor fell to his knees, breathing hard, struggling, his empire gone in a single moment. Evelyn stood over him, her hands still trembling, but her eyes clear, free. Victor looked up at her, blood on his lips. You were nothing, he rasped. Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, her voice didn't break. Not this time. I was surviving. Pause. Then, and now, I'm living. Victor collapsed, and didn't move. Again. The war was over. Just like that. For a long moment no one spoke. The fire crackled. The wind whispered. And the weight of everything that had happened settled into the ground beneath them. Colt stepped toward her, slowly, carefully, like approaching something fragile, something real. You okay? He asked. Evelyn let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. I think I finally am. Her legs gave slightly, and before she could fall, Colt caught her, strong, steady. Cert? She looked up at him. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't the same tears anymore. These weren't from fear. These were from release, from freedom. It's over, he said. Evelyn nodded. It's over. Days later, the smoke had cleared. Red Hollow began to rebuild. The dead were buried. The living moved on. That's how the West worked. And no matter how much it took from you, it kept going. Sheriff Boone survived, barely. Hank Dawson didn't. Some said it was justice. Others said it was fate. Either way, his story ended the way it began. driven by greed. But Evelyn's story was different. She stood at the edge of Colt's ranch one morning, the sun rising over the open land. No fear, no shadows, just possibility. Colt walked up beside her, hat low, hands relaxed. "You plannin' on riding out?" he asked. Evelyn smiled softly. "No." She looked out at the horizon. "Think. I'm done running." Colt nodded. Didn't push, didn't rush. That wasn't his way. After a moment, she turned to him. "What about you?" He glanced at her, then back at the land. "I was thinking, maybe this place could use someone who sees it the way I do." Evelyn tilted her head. "And how's that?" Colt's voice softened. "Like it's worth fighting for." Silence, but not the heavy kind, the peaceful kind. Then Evelyn stepped closer, just enough. "You still see through people?" she asked. Colt smirked slightly. "Only the ones worth looking at." Her heart skipped, and this time she didn't hide it. "Good," she said, quietly. "Because I'm done hiding." Colt reached for her hand, slow, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers intertwined, not rushed, not forced, just right. Out in the distance, horses ran free across the land. The wind carried something new. Not fear, not danger. Hope. Because in a world where the past hunted you, and pain tried to define you, sometimes all it took was one person who refused to look away.